We know that we're not just in a cohort now, there's a cohort coming right behind us, and we're going to be fellows for good. So we're at the start right now, but where are we going to be in 6 months or a year's time? It's going to be a really exciting journey, not just for us. We're like part of a movement.
Welcome to What Donors Want, a podcast by IG Advisors. I'm Rachel Stephenson Sheff, the managing director here at IG, and we're a strategy consultancy focused on social and environmental change. In the 4th season of our podcast, we'll be changing things up a bit. We know it's not just what donors want that's important, and that sometimes over-focusing on this can be a problem in the nonprofit sector. So, in this season, we'll be exploring what we all want by speaking with movers and shakers to delve into the state of our beautiful, yet in many ways broken sector. To collectively imagine solutions to the things that keep us up at night and inspire more progressive practices and ways of collaborating. This podcast is part of our mission to fix the flow of resources for good. Welcome back to What Donors Want. I'm Rachel, the host of the show.
And I'm Emily, IG's CEO.
Ooh, that rhymed. I like it. Today is a very unique episode. It's all about our FixTheFlow fellowship, which not only has the greatest alliteration ever, but it's also a really incredible fellowship where we work with fundraisers of all levels from all over the world to change the funding system. And that's what we're going to talk about today. So as you know, I'm here with Emily, our CEO, who will tell you a little bit more about the podcast and kind of set the scene for today. But before I pass it on to you, Emily, I, of course, just want to start with a huge thank you and shout out to our official Season 4 sponsor, Siegel Family Foundation, whose generosity and partnership makes this all possible. I also want to send a thank you and shout out to our fantastic media partner, Alliance Magazine. Check out their website, alliancemagazine.org, and you can get 50% off of an Alliance subscription by using the code WhatDonorsWant, all one word, at checkout. All right, housekeeping done. Over to you, Emily.
Thank you, Rachel, and hi, everyone. So as Rachel said, about a year ago, we decided to add this bold systems change project to our work at IG, the FixTheFlow Fellowship. And I did spend a little minute on that alliteration there, so I'm glad that you like it.
You absolutely nailed it.
And I wanted to just quickly explain why we did this. And the honest answer is we were just really annoyed. We've been fundraisers for a long time. We've been doing this podcast for a long time. At IG, we've worked with, I think, more than 2,000 funding professionals, mobilizing more than £2 billion worth of resources for social good. We really know our stuff, and we're tired. We're tired of the inequities and the challenges of the funding system. And we know that as fundraisers, we are vital organizers. We are organizers of giving. We're bridges. We act as advocates, not just for our causes, but also for our donors. We're constantly convincing people of things, right? That is our job, to convince people of things. And in doing that, we're competing as well. We're competing with our peers for too small pools of funding. We're struggling with not enough people on our teams, and people don't trust us, or they have misconceptions about our work. And overall, the funding picture is that resources do not flow where they are most needed. There are leakages and blockages and cracks across the funding system, and this stops the good from happening, or it hampers long-lasting change. And we also know that we really feel alone. We really feel alone with this. We don't feel like we're able to change anything. We feel disconnected from other fundraisers in our community. And there's only so much learning you can do about the art and the science of fundraising. There are bigger challenges that can't be solved alone. We need to come together to solve those challenges. So that's where the idea of the fellowship came from. And I'll be honest, I was a little nervous. In the fundraising world, it's not usual to openly say, the system is broken. Obviously, as fundraisers, we're trained to just focus on getting the money in, meeting our targets, competing with each other, and making our donors happy, right? Rather than challenging the inequitable ways that the funding system works. But we launched the fellowship. We had a full amount of applications from fundraisers all over the world. And now we have this flourishing community of ambitious fundraisers who want to learn what they need to learn to thrive in the modern nonprofit world, but also lead the movement for change within the funding system so that we can all fix the flow of resources for good. I also spent a minute on that. So there you go. Very good. So as you'll hear, the fellowship is open to fundraisers of all levels anywhere in the world. And we're currently in the middle of Cohort 1. So it's Cohort 1 fellows that we'll be hearing from today. Applications for Cohort 2 are now open until June 9th. So if you want to find out more, you can go to FixTheFlow.org. And I'll tell you more about the program at the end of the episode. But today we really wanted to just give a platform to a few of our brilliant Fix the Flow fellows so they could speak about the challenges they face in their roles as fundraisers and the change that they want to create in the funding system.
Thanks, Emily. That was the perfect scene set. So off we go into the conversation. And also, listeners, I do want to assure you that no fellows were bribed in the making of this podcast. All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome to What Donors Want. Thank you so much for your time today and for joining us, and of course, for all your time in the fellowship. So before we dive in today, we just want to start with a quick round of roundtable introductions. So if you could introduce yourselves, say your name, your work, the organization that you're from, and then also say to listeners what you are finding most challenging about being a fundraiser within the current funding system.
Well, hi. So I'm Katie Hillett from Refuge, the largest specialist domestic abuse charity in the UK. And what I'm finding really challenging actually is the sustainability of funding. That is really tricky. Not being able to have long-term funding means that we can't adapt to our circumstances and change things, and we can't plan ahead far enough. So I would say for me, it's that long-term view that underpinning the sustainability of our organizations through funding is absolutely essential. If we don't have that, we won't exist.
Hi, my name's Anna, my pronouns are she, they, and I work at UK Youth as a Trust and Foundations fundraiser. What I think is one of the biggest challenges at the moment is that in the way the funding system is right now, often charities are forced to compete with each other and are forced to compete for the same funds. And I don't think any of us particularly like doing that, but it's also not the best way to deliver the most impact. But there's so little resource and only such specific ways where it goes that I think that is a huge challenge, because we want to work more collaboratively, we want to work better and more efficiently, but it's quite challenging.
Hi, I'm Emily. I'm the fundraising coordinator with a climate justice youth movement called Me and Youth, and I'm also the fundraising officer for the Carbon Literacy Project. And one of the key problems that we're facing at the moment is a lack of flexible core funding. So when you apply for funds, you normally have to come up with a new sparkly project in order to apply for those funds. And it's very difficult as an organisation that wants to be trusted to do what you do best and do what you're doing well, to actually have the core funds to continue to do that instead of to have to come up with a new project each time. And funds are often gatekept and very difficult to access for offline youth and most affected communities. They take a very long time to apply for those types of communities. So that's one of the key problems we're grappling with at the moment.
Hi, I'm Naomi Lyons. Pronouns are she, her. I head up the Philanthropy Partnerships and Ambassadors team at Oxfam, Great Britain. I think one of the things I'm grappling with as a fundraiser at the moment is tuning into the power dynamics of essentially our entire organisation, and on a personal level, reflecting on how I may have inadvertently contributed to power dynamics kind of over the years that actually now I realise aren't healthy. So I'm trying to unlearn and unpick, I guess, kind of nearly 20 years of fundraising mindset and trying to work out what that means and what my responsibility is as a head of team for how I support our relationship managers.
Hi, my name is Samira Pofsinger. I am a team lead for a movement called Climate Justice Africa. And I think right now our biggest problem is, I think, what the previous speaker talked about, of gatekeeping funds from offline communities. And two, we have issues knowing where to find funders and which funders to approach. We deal with integrity from funders because we're a climate justice organization. We do not have to take funds from everyone. So we also are dealing with sieving which funder we should take money from, which funder we shouldn't take money from, which funder we should bring on board with us, who we shouldn't. And so it's a bit complicated. And because we are new to the whole spectrum, we're just trying to maneuver it.
My name is Sophie, and I am the Trust and Philanthropy Manager at a charity called Become in the UK. I think one of the things that I find most challenging about being a fundraiser in the current system is that sometimes it really feels like you just don't have any power to change things, because of this something about the scarcity mindset that exists within the funding system, which means that there's a real fear about rocking the boat, which can sometimes be quite legitimate because your ability to raise money can be impacted if you do something quote unquote wrong, and trying to change things within the funding system can feel like that might have that effect and mean that you can't raise money for your cause, or you're seen as being a troublemaker, and it gives you challenges professionally. So that feels really challenging because we're stuck within a system that feels frustrating, and we can see that there are things not working, but it also feels like there's not a lot of scope to make those changes without potentially having some big impacts on the work that our organisations do, and that's really important, and those end communities that need us to raise money to do the work to improve their lives. So that's really challenging. But I think one of the things that stood out for me from being part of the fellowship so far is that there is such energy within the group about making those changes, and also some real bravery and courage about actually taking the steps that are needed, and stepping out in that boldness to say, I'm going to try something new, and to see some of the impacts of that has been really inspiring, and also it gives me a bit more courage to try those things out and to actually try and make a difference, and to not sort of fall back on that fear of getting it wrong.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone. I mean, that was such a great introduction. I know there's more fellows in the program right now than there are on this call, but actually there's a really nice spread of cause areas and countries that you work in and challenges. So I'm really just grateful that you all showed up today and that we can have this conversation.
And just to echo, I think one of the things that's really come through for me from the fellowship so far is that even though we've got, I think, 14 different countries or 14 different program areas represented, and lots of different kind of levels of seniority and sizes of team, that actually some of the things we're most frustrated about and finding the most challenging, there's a lot of commonalities in what we're struggling with, and it's not unique to one country or one type of fundraising, or just unique to the type of job that you're doing. And I think it's fair to say that one of the reasons we started this fellowship is that we at IG were just as frustrated as you are about some of these challenges and inequities also within the funding system, and that resources don't always flow where they're needed most. So as you know, as well as learning together as part of the fellowship, a part of what we've been doing is these systems change workshops, where we've been articulating our experiences, our challenges, and our dreams for the funding system. And I'm interested to hear from you all from that process so far. We're only 6 months into the 12-month process. What has stood out for you about the collective vision of the FixTheFlow Fellows for the funding system of the future? So we've worked together to articulate that shared vision. So I'm interested to hear from you all what has stood out to you.
I think what's really stood out to me is so many things we kind of face together, but there's a few spaces where we can realize that. And when talking about the dream of the funding system and how we would love it to look like and be like, I think two things that just always came out were power dynamics and trust, because there are so many varied dynamics within the system, but within charities, I feel like we often feel like almost to just trust us, we know what we're doing, which obviously is easier said than done. But to build this trust, to build long-term relationships, as Emily said, not just making a new shiny project, but working together for long-term sustainable change based on trust and in communities. I think that really stuck with how shared that dream is.
To build on what Anna said, I think what's really important as well is transparency. So it goes hand in hand with trust. And what's really come across to me is that if you don't have that transparency and that communication and the data and the accountability, then you can't change things. If you don't understand how the system is already working, then how do you know how to shape it? And one of the areas that we were talking about is accountability on systems to give well. So how do those systems evolve and how do they show those best practices? And that's really a tricky challenge, understanding the transparency and where funding flows are coming from, how decisions are made and how people are participating in those decisions. That came across really strongly across the fellow group.
Can I ask a follow-up question around trust? Because that is what both of you just mentioned in your initial answers. And I'm just curious around the concept of earning trust, because that's often what follows on from that word. Trust is earned. That works in both directions, from the donor earning your trust, your organization earning the donor's trust. And how much of a role do you think the earning of trust should play in this ideal system? Whose responsibility is it to do that? What is a reasonable role for you as a fundraiser to earn a donor's trust, and where are the boundaries around that?
I think there's so much of that trust that comes from relationships. And what we see, if there's a standard of short-term project funding, is that you actually rarely get the chance to build that trust. So you default to KPIs, and I have nothing against KPIs, but kind of standard templates of how to measure trust in numbers. Whereas I actually think that such a good way forward is multi-year partnerships, long-term partnerships where funders get to know a charity better, charities to funders as well, and also the communities in which a particular program or a particular charity might work in. So I think those relationships are really core to making that happen, and in a sustainable and productive way.
Mm-hmm. I like what you pointed to there, which is also the concept of resourcing that trust building process. There's a lot of nuance around that. Of course, there needs to be some before you enter into a partnership, but the idea of a long-term partnership where trust can be grown and built and strengthened over time together with resources to underpin that is quite exciting and radical, actually. And
just valuing that practice. What we value, we fund. And so understanding the value of that activity and that skill and that practice within the overall system, rather than denigrating or stigmatizing it, which tends to happen quite a lot with the practice of fundraising, is something that I think is really important.
One of the things that we've been thinking about is, how do we pass on any trust that funders have placed in us to the local partners that we work with and the communities we work with. And I think in our quest for kind of more flexible funding, realizing that we need to go on that journey with our funders and build that trust up. I think you can have a responsibility in terms of communicating the vision and putting a spotlight on the partners we work with in the communities and allowing them to speak for themselves. But we've looked at how are we trusting the partners that we work with and not passing on some of the really burdensome prescriptive reporting requirements that, as Anna said, have sort of taken the place of building trust rather than really open, transparent conversations. And we've got something called the Women's Rights Fund, which is trying to do that, where it's totally flexible funding over a 3-year basis. And it's quite different for us to be doing it that way because we've come from a history of having really quite prescriptive, exacting kind of reporting requirements, which is a reflection of what we've been asked for. So we're now recognizing more and more that role we play as kind of intermediaries, where we can help make the most of the trust that we've gained through, the advantage of being around for a while and having the profile that we do. We've got a good reputation in many ways, which allows us to kind of pass that on, I think, to local partners. And one of the questions that I think has made me stop and think is the role of unsolicited applications, which I think someone had put about, I think I'd always thought that unsolicited applications, totally valid. You can't, expect funders to be bombarded by thousands of applications. And then I stopped and thought, is that fair? Is that the best use of the position of power that those funders have? Where's the onus on them, as you say, to be resourcing, to do the due diligence on areas that they're interested in, or to not have really lengthy application processes for what can often be really small amounts of funding, and that isn't fair for smaller organisations or any organisation. Again, that kind of, I want us to trust that funders have thought about their application processes as much as we've thought about ours.
No, I completely agree. And as well, if you're working within really tight parameters around your project reporting, you're missing opportunities to discover other things that could be really exciting and interesting about the project. So if you're creating those kind of safe spaces to share learning, and you're allowed to fail, even though we don't even want to use the term fail, it's all an opportunity to learn. if you're learning from what's going on in your programs and you're having those open discussions, that builds trust as well. And that also gives you that opportunity to evolve your programming rather than being too constrained and too fixated on delivering something that's really, really rigid.
This is also interesting. The role that you're highlighting there of the intermediary, I think, is such a unique, complex position. And every intermediary we've ever worked with asks the same questions.
I actually disagree about it being unique to intermediaries. I think something that we've spoken about a lot on this fellowship is the importance of our role as fundraisers, regardless of whether it's, just us starting out a little community organization or we're working as part of big intermediary organizations, that fundamentally we represent the funding system within our organizations and within our community. So whether our job is to literally pass through that money to other organizations or community groups, or whether we're just literally translating it into programs by delivering them ourselves, that fundamentally we can represent and perpetuate the problematic characteristics of the funding system and the problematic desires of our funders, etc., into the worlds that we occupy. So I actually disagree that it's just about intermediaries. I think we all are an intermediary in some sense.
I really like that way of looking at it. And it's like you are forced to walk the walk, in the sense of the tension between what trust do we want from our donors and am I giving that same trust to whether that's your grantees or other stakeholders that you serve, the communities you work with. And oftentimes the answer is not as perfect as we want it to be. And that's also okay. I mean, it's human. It makes sense. There's a lot of complex variables there, but I think it's like you can't escape your own reality. You're just constantly forced to look yourself in the mirror as an organization or as a fundraiser and go, am I walking the walk? And oftentimes the answer could be better. And well, that's why we're all doing the work we do. I really love that angle on things. And I totally take your point, Emily. I like that.
Anything else that stood out from this future vision of the funding system?
For me, one thing I have seen that has helped in creating trust between funders and most of us down this side at the grassroots is usually funders don't come through for us in the first round of approaching them. But when we keep them updated, when we keep them in mind and keep giving them feedback and they see progress and they learn to trust us, and then, but that works for us down at the grassroots. I don't know what works for, I've learned a lot from Naomi and the rest. And yeah, I just wanted to put that out there because for me, it has worked for me on the few grants I have been able to fundraise for the organization and for other organizations where I part-time and work for. So yeah, I don't know if it's helpful, but it helps with the idea.
Definitely.
And I just wanted to make a point about optimism. What I've really enjoyed about the fellowship is how much optimism there is across the group for change. And we, the experience that we've all been through with COVID in the last couple of years, we saw that things that we thought were part of the system can be flexible, can be changed. People can make decisions and make things more flexible, do things really quickly. We've removed a lot of barriers, and I think we're now in a new world that the future of the funding system looks really exciting. It looks like there's disruptors coming in. We've got lots of change. We've got lots of different ways that people are working. The next gen donors coming through have very different ideas. I feel like we're actually at an exciting moment where the future's going to evolve quite quickly, and the speed of things is something that we can keep up with and we can be really excited about.
I totally agree. And I think, not to overstate it as too selfish of a move, but I think that one of the reasons I wanted to start this fellowship is to give myself hope and to kind of work in community with all of you for exactly that emotional experience. And I know we're only 6 months into this journey together as kind of cohort 1, but I'm interested in hearing from you all about how you're all feeling about the potential to create change compared to, say a year ago before you'd even heard of this fellowship. Where are you at with that? And it's okay if there's still some kind of pessimism or pragmatism in there. I think it's important we explore that together all the time on our calls. I agree that there's more hope there, but change takes time. Changing systems is really complicated, and as we've all worked on together, it's very hard work. And so I'm interested in your experience of that. How are you feeling about that potential to create change in this system?
I'd definitely say since becoming a fellow, I feel much more positive. I think Katie put it brilliantly. One of the reasons I wanted to become a fellow was So thinking about some of these things, but it can sometimes just sort of roll around in your head a little bit, and you don't necessarily get the headspace to separate it from the really urgent day-to-day priorities, and find that time and the inspiration from others about what does great look like. And I found that the work we've done on that so far has been amazing, because for me, I have to be able to kind of imagine a vision. I have to be able to kind of feel like I'm working towards something. And it can feel often, quite overwhelming. You're thinking about power dynamics that have been in play for decades, and, but I think finding other people with that same drive and that same incredible experience and so much talent has definitely felt like that movement is building towards change. And so being able to come together and try and articulate what does great look like has given me, a huge amount of hope.
I really love what you just said about what does great look like. I think that is such an amazing way to phrase it, because as you said, so it can feel quite isolating. And what I found so inspiring is that we can share this journey and kind of walk along together. And I think in general, there is a lot of hope, and there are changes, and there are funders who are great and listening, or who are already doing great things. There's change afoot, if you wish. But from a bit of a pragmatic side, not to bring the energy down, but what I really valued about the fellowship is that it almost has dedicated space in my work calendar where I can engage with things like that, because my normal day-to-day does not look like that. And I imagine for a lot of people, it doesn't. So I found it really valuable. But I'm sure there's other organizations where there isn't necessarily the time for that, where somebody is a sole fundraiser, where the pressures are different. And I think that is one of the things we have to account for. And we often talk about professionalism of fundraisers as a profession, which I think ties in with kind of this looking at workload targets, capacity, roles in organizations. So that's a bit of my pragmatism coming in. But generally, yes, I think it is that hope that this work is also being seen as very, very important work for long-term change that is beneficial in itself.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that I've taken away from this fellowship is just how many, if not all, of the people in the fellowship kind of agree with the point that Anna made earlier, which is that we don't want to be competing against one another. We do want to be collaborating with one another. And I think just all acknowledging that is a very powerful move, very powerful step in the right direction. We don't get given opportunities very frequently to actually join together with other fundraisers and imagine a better future and actually work towards that collaboration, unless we're in the same cohort of fundies, which I know some great funders are doing at the moment, like the Blagrave Trust, bringing the cohort together to collaborate, which I think is a really great move. But also outside of being part of the same funding cohort, there's not very many opportunities for funders to come together and say, okay, well, how can we collaborate and not compete with one another? How can we make the pot bigger for everybody? How can we redirect funds towards the causes that we care about and not feel like we're kind of facing a losing battle in that way? So yeah, I think that's really powerful. And yeah, it's definitely something that's core to the work that we're doing at Me and Youth, is trying to shake up the sector and try to create some change within philanthropy and encourage donors to engage in more trust-based giving, and maybe not take so long to distribute funds. So it's definitely all moving in the right direction.
Definitely.
I 100% agree with you, Emily. And I think something that's been really powerful for me in this fellowship is just gaining that confidence as a cohort of fellows. We have that confidence to take these messages back internally, because we know that we're learning not only from IG advisors, but also it's a great platform and they're bringing in expertise from externally across the sector. So that for me, I felt has really built my confidence to focus on building that sustainable funding base within my organisation. And so I'm doing much more to advocate internally for the way that things can work and the way we can build more equitable systems and the way that we can shift those power dynamics. And that is absolutely priceless. And we know that we're not just in a cohort now, there's a cohort coming right behind us, and we're going to be fellows for good. So we're at the start right now, but where are we going to be in 6 months or a year's time? It's going to be a really exciting journey, not just for us. We're part of a movement. But I think internally in all of our own organizations, we're making such an impact already just as individuals who, especially for those of us who don't have big teams or are not really, necessarily in very senior roles, like we're sharing that expertise. And I think that confidence as a fellow has been great.
Thank you so much.
That's so lovely to hear.
Yeah.
Rachel and I are just like
there's
crying and dancing a little bit here. So.
And for listeners, there's like a lot of hearts, the sparkly Zoom heart reaction emoji. There's a lot of those. So echoing all of that. Thank you so much. Amira, over to you.
I feel so that I'm speaking after her because what she said was really powerful. But for me, it's like I found a community with the fellowship. I found a community for myself. And every time we talk about things like during our sessions, I noticed that I'm not the only one going through the issues I am having with my fundraising. All of us are having these problems. And then we get solutions all together, like here in this session. Then you have coffee with this person. Then you have our groups that I keep forgetting the name of that at time, but you have our groups. And then like we're all dealing with different things in different parts of the world. But they're all fundraising issues. And if I don't have a solution, someone else is always willing to have a solution. And it feels like I have a small home for what I do, and I have somewhere to run to when I have issues. And it has added value to me because I learn more. And I also know I am not special. This is not something made just for me, but everyone that is in fundraising is going through it. And it has helped me keep moving forward. And also, like I said in the beginning, it has helped me like keep saying, yes, now that has died, let's go on the next one and let's prove ourselves. So it has helped me become stronger and be hopeful, and also know that I'm dealing with problems everyone else is dealing with.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That is also really powerful and deserving of sparkly Zoom hearts as well. So thank you.
This podcast is made possible by Seagull Family Foundation. We are building an extensive network of extraordinary people, positively transforming lives and communities across Africa. Whether you're a dreamer, funder, leader, or visionary, our network can help you make the greatest impact. To learn more, visit www.seagullfamilyfoundation.org or contact us at info@seagullfamilyfoundation.org.
I just want to kind of echo a few things that have been shared so far, because what stood out for me from the collective vision that we've all put together for the kind of future that we want to see in 10 years' time is this focus on relationships and collaboration and, words like solidarity and allyship. And we're talking sometimes about what we want from funders and donors, but we're also talking about what we want from each other and how we want to all be collectively working towards impact. And I think that's coming through so strongly in what you're describing as giving you hope here. But I think it's really worth highlighting that that's what we want the future to look like, right? Where we're all, whether we are wealth holders or we're program officers in a foundation or we're fundraisers or we're leaders or whatever we are, that we're all collectively working towards impact, and that there's no capitalist or like patriarchal structures that are keeping us in our little silos fighting with each other over scarce resources, but where we're thinking, okay, what are the needs? Who is most marginalized? How do we mobilize those resources where they're most needed? And how do we collaborate towards that? So I just find that super inspiring. And as has been said, it's incredibly inspiring to be in community with people who share that vision and can articulate the challenges that we're all facing collectively as well.
Ditto. Oh my gosh. Okay, now we've got the party hat Zoom emoji. I love this. Okay, so just to move to the final question, which is, I'd love for you to imagine that a fundraiser is listening to this podcast, of which there are likely many. And thinking back over your last 6-ish months in the fellowship, what is something that you think another fundraiser should take away from your experience? Whether that's a tactical piece of advice from a masterclass or the action learning sets or any of the learning sessions or the human-centered design process. It could be the smallest thing or the biggest concept. I'd love for you to just give a piece of advice or a kind of a nugget of wisdom or information to a fundraiser who's listening to this so that you can help them in their own work.
I think what came to my head is just the phrase like, it's worth it, which is it's worth it to try to make those small changes, to work in your team, whether that's on a due diligence or an application. It's worth trying to go these steps because change is possible. And it often, I feel like, feels so abstract and far away. And I forgot who, but somebody says like these been these systems have been in place for so long. I think actually it was Naomi, it was you. But just having that, like, these little things will work together, and then other people will appreciate that, will take it away. And yeah, it's just, it is worth it, and it changes things. And yeah, so thank you to everyone who's doing those steps and like talking and changing things.
I love that. It's like the new, what is it, L'Oreal or Maybelline ad, or L'Oreal, like, it's worth it. You're worth it. It's there's some sort of campaign there. I love it.
I love that. I didn't know that, but I love it. So just think of the ad whenever you're doing something in fundraising. Not to advertise anything. Sorry.
Yeah, I know. Sorry, that just got very capitalist. But anyway, just my sense of humor. Katie, over to you.
Well, how to follow that one? Well, I think for me, it's about recognizing that in some areas you have strengths, and what the fellowship does is like tweak and turn them into super strengths. So we had some incredible sessions on, for example, reviewing cases for support, or looking at the psychology of how people make decisions and the messaging. That was really, really fascinating and helpful and interesting. And then in other areas, when you join the fellowship, you realize that you have whole areas that you have not been very familiar with, and you are learning a huge amount. The whole human-centered design approach for me was completely new. So it's a great opportunity to know that you're on the right track with lots of things, and get that validation and tweak it and improve. But then in other areas, just grow in a whole different way. And yeah, that's great.
For me, it was realizing that since I joined the fellowship, it's not sort of another thing on my to-do list, like shifting my mindset away from every day is so busy, how on earth am I going to make the time for this? And realizing that actually it's given me so much energy. And in some ways, kind of the benefit isn't quantifiable, because it sparked lots of other thoughts and conversations that I don't think I would have had if I hadn't been in the fellowship. So whether someone's in the fellowship or not, I suppose it's just thinking about, give yourself permission to carve out time to think about some of this stuff, the little thoughts that are rolling around your head, the things that are niggling at you, that like, this doesn't feel right, there's got to be a different way. Like, just find someone who might feel the same and connect, and allow yourself to just go into that space, because actually I found that incredibly energizing and really powerful, and I'm very grateful for that.
Yeah, if anybody's listening, I would say you're not alone. Everybody who works in fundraising knows that it can sometimes be quite an isolating experience. But I think being in the fellowship has made me realise that everybody's in the same boat, and everybody does want to collaborate with one another and not compete. So definitely, I would say, if anyone's listening, reach out to people in your sector and see how you can talk about things that you have in common. I think we all have more in common than we do apart, and we're all fighting for the same thing. So let's see how we can do that more collaboratively.
Oh, that's amazing. And I think the final one for me is like, don't expect the system to fix itself. Like, we are all agents of change. We all have agency to push back if we're in conversations with, a potential philanthropist, and it's just not going the way that we think it could work. To be brave and have that conversation and open it up and see ourselves as we can make those changes and we can support those shifts, and doing it as a collective just feels amazing as well.
Mm-hmm. I love that. It's also reminding me of the kickoff way back when, in the day, when we had, as part of the onboarding quiz, we asked you, when you're struggling with fundraising, who or what do you blame? Is it your organization? Is it your team? Is it the system? Or is it yourself? And there was some really, really interesting statistics.
83% of us blame ourselves when we're struggling to fundraise. But also, basically, no one said that they had all of the support, community, training, or guidance they needed to succeed as a fundraiser. And so I think it was a bit of a downer in terms of the starting point, but I think there's just, that not alone point, and that it's not your fault. The system won't change on its own. We have to kind of change and push for change and ask for change. And yeah, I totally echo that. And I think now, hopefully, we're all blaming ourselves slightly less.
Yes, less gaslighting of ourselves within this funding system, and more collective and collaborative practices to changing it. I love that.
I think I am going to borrow Emily's statement of "You're not alone," because it goes back to my experience before I came to the fellowship. I blamed myself for everything. I felt like I wasn't doing enough, I wasn't reading enough, I wasn't writing the best proposals, or I wasn't approaching people in the right way. But for me, anything I want to tell them is whatever small step you're doing in fundraising and in growing in your fundraising journey, that's good. Like, you should count that day and be like, pat yourself on the back and be like, I did something today. I did something positive in the right direction of changing the system. And that alone will keep us going, and it will help us deal with our anxiety as fundraisers, because we deal with that so much. Myself, at least I know I have a lot of anxiety. So every time you are grateful that you did something small, you probably learned something small, you probably approached a new funder, you probably do. Whatever you do in your fundraising field, anything you do is a step towards the change we are looking for of changing the system. So you're doing well, and thank you.
That was beautiful.
That was beautiful. So just to thank you all so much for your time today, for your wisdom, for your time over this fellowship, everything. It's such a pleasure and an honor to do this with you, to be in community with you. I know we're part of the fellowship community too, and it's so nice to get to know all of you and to do this work together. So thank you.
Can I ask you both a question?
Sure.
While you're
Yes.
here. I mean, this is your first one. So, like, what has been surprising to you?
So I can go first. I think what's been, is it fair to say it's surprising? Because I kind of had the idea to start this because I really believed in us as a global community of people who are working really hard at this job. I really believed in us, and I understood, had experienced many of the challenges. So it's not surprising like I didn't believe it, but I have been pleasantly surprised by the kind of extent to which everybody is committing to being vulnerable with each other, collaborating. There's folks who have already done kind of collaborations outside of the fellowship, sharing everybody's, experiences and fears, and also like what you're working on, and giving each other feedback. I think there's just so much in that it would be very easy to just kind of dial into something like this and not participate fully. Like, it's possible to, I don't know about you, but I sign up for a lot of webinars that I either don't go to or I do, but I'm actually doing 7,000 other things at the same time. But that is not what is the case with this fellowship. Everybody is so switched on. Everybody's catching up with the recordings. Everybody's bringing their experiences and showcasing them. And I believe that could be the case because that was part of the design, but I have been bowled over by what is possible when we are in meaningful community with each other. So I don't know if it's fair to say surprised, but extra bowled over, more bowled over than I expected to be.
Oh, I love that. Yes, ditto. The first thing that comes to my mind is actually very similar to Naomi, your answer around how time expanding systems change work can be. And how, we all have busy jobs, and we have lots of amazing clients at IG that we're working on, as well as running this fellowship. And sometimes I can definitely fall into the busy trap mindset of feeling all the things that we all know, of the endless to-do list, and everything's busy, everything is something to do. And I'm so, I guess, surprised / continually bowled over, or whatever phrase you want to use, about how having conversations that are about systems and like collective imaginations and our hopes and our dreams and our fears, how they actually add energy to the rest of my day. It's like a 1 hour call creates like 4 hours of my like high vibrations going into the rest of the things that I'm doing. And I love that. It's like, if we make the time to carve out this space, whether it's in a fellowship or with other fundraisers in your community or with your team or with yourself, like however you can access headspace to dream about a better way, it adds a lot of energy to the rest of the things that you're doing. It doesn't become another thing on the to-do list. It becomes the entire to-do list. That gives me a lot of hope.
It helps us to embody that when we have space for imagining a better way. When we go about the daily to-do list, we can then embody that better way in every little thing we're doing. Then people see us doing that, or, people ask us, how come you're doing things that way? Like, it's like the ripple effect of each of us doing little things. And I think, Katie, you said, the system won't change itself, but we also can't change the whole thing overnight, but we are all kind of part of it in little ways. And so the fact that those ripple effects are already being felt after only 6 months is also, I will be honest, quite surprising to me and very inspiring.
Yeah. All right, that's the real end. Thank you all so much. That's all we've got for today. A huge thank you again to our fellows, both the ones, of course, who are on the call today, but also those who weren't able to make the call, because you're still very much a part of our fellow community, and we love you all so much.
Yes, and thank you so much to everyone for making this Fix the Flow Fellowship what it is, and for making my awkward British soul die a little bit from all of the earnest compliments on that conversation.
Same with me, but it was so lovely. I don't even know how to express that.
I wanted to quickly share some details about the program too, for anyone who's listening that's interested in joining our movement. The program is designed to move fellows from being resource mobilizers to resource activists. And you can check out my blog about what pushed me to become a resource activist on our website, impactandgrowth.com. But a resource activist is someone who organizes giving, who works to redistribute resources within the funding system and plays an impactful role in the system overall rather than just their organization, someone who sees themselves as part of that system. And the purpose of this is so that we can all champion our causes and the practice of giving so that we can get more resources flowing where they're needed most. By doing that, we're also trying to feel more connected to a purpose rather than just burnt out or stuck churning through transactional relationship building in a silo, which many of us in the fundraising world feel like. So the Fix the Flow Fellowship is a 12-month program, and it's bespoke to each cohort's needs. It focuses on 4 levels of impact. There's number 1, the individual level, where we work with you on your personal development as a fundraiser, which helps to enhance your craft and your confidence and your commitment no matter where you're working. Level 2 is the organizational level, where we help you to identify your pain points and goals and set you up for success when driving fundraising within your workplace, no matter what your job title is. Level 3 is the sectoral level, where we bring together cohorts of fundraisers who face similar challenges to do action learning together and create community. And then finally, level 4 is the systemic level, where we collectively define the areas of the funding system that need to change and develop collaborative action plans and special projects together. Feedback from our current fellows, as you heard on the episode, shows huge improvements in their confidence in their ability to fundraise effectively, their energy and motivation for their role, connection to other fundraisers, and generally feeling more empowered to change the funding system overall. And we've also seen huge fundraising successes across the cohort, creation of new materials and programs, really great collaboration between fellows, and brilliant ideas for how we can collectively create change. The fellowship is open to fundraisers of all levels, anywhere in the world, and we have slightly separate streams for emerging and senior fundraisers. Applications for our next cohort are open until June 9th at FixTheFlow.org, and we would love to see you join our movement. If you have any questions, you can get in touch.
And as I said, stay tuned for more exciting podcast episodes coming soon. In the meantime, you know where to find us. On Twitter, we're at IG_advisors. Our website is impactandgrowth.com. And as Emily said, our Fix the Flow Fellowship website is FixTheFlow.org. So in terms of applying for the fellowship by June 9th, you go to FixTheFlow.org. And of course, you can also just shoot me an email or anyone on the team an email if you have any questions. My email address is Rachel, RACHEL, at IG-advisors.com. And that's advisors spelt ORS, not ERS.
The American way.
The American way, which makes sense to my brain, but it may not make sense to all of yours. All right. And finally, of course, just to wrap up with a huge thank you to our official sponsor, Siegel Family Foundation, for making this all possible, and to our media partner, Alliance Magazine. Don't forget, you can use the code WhatDonorsWant, all one word, for 50% off of an Alliance subscription. All right. That's it for today. Thanks again for listening. See you soon. This podcast was produced by myself, Rachel Stephenson Sheff, Esther Kavor, and the team at Scrubcast. Shout out to our editors, Dave and Tim. If you liked it, please rate, review, and subscribe. It really helps us do what we do. Thanks so much.